We live in a culture that is obsessed with appearance. You will rarely see anyone in public life without flawless skin, perfect hair, and attractive features. Entire careers are built on it. It is the foundation of certain lifestyles. It's the reason plastic surgery has enjoyed a steady growth in our country, reaching a revenue of $8.5 billion in the US in 2022. It's the reason why the US is the biggest cosmetics market in the world, with profits of about 580 billion in 2023. And even if your career, lifestyle, healthcare, and pocketbook don't depend on appearance, it's hard to ignore the impact of it. My family has been to several comics conventions together, where we've had the opportunity to see hundreds of folks dressed up like their favorite characters from books, TV, and movies, cosplayers. They change their appearance to take on the identity of a character that has qualities beyond their own. And it seems like in doing so, their personal appearance matters less. In their personal life, they might think their nose is too long or too short, their hips too round or too straight. But in their costume, they are proud and brave. I think one of the amazing things about these events is that rigid cultural standards about appearance are a little bit suspended. What matters is not whether you have acne or a long nose, but the effort and detail you've put into your costume. It's a slightly different, gentler world. Captain America, the First Avenger, released in 2011, is a film that explores the impact of appearance versus character. It was written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, directed by Joe Johnston, and stars Chris Evans in the title role. The part we're interested in comes at the beginning of the movie. A young man named Steve Rogers wants to serve his country in World War II, but is rejected for recruitment due to a host of health and physical problems, including just being small and not very strong. It turns out that America is developing a super soldier program, and the scientist who is leading the research is impressed with Rogers' desire and initiative. The scientist allows him to enlist for the experiment. In training, Rogers' small stature, weak muscles, and health problems make him a very unlikely candidate to be chosen as the super soldier. In one scene, the soldiers in the experiment are on a road march. Rogers can be seen trailing behind, flailing a little as he struggles to catch up. His small frame is a stark contrast to the beefy musculature of the rest of the troops, who are running in perfect formation. The drill sergeant calls a halt and points to a pole with a flag on top. He tells the men that they are only halfway done with the march. Whoever can get to the flag at the top of the pole can ride back to base in a jeep. The soldiers immediately run to the pole. One after another, they try to climb it, but all slide helplessly back down. The drill sergeant yells at them, telling them to get back in formation. Meanwhile, Rogers has been hanging back, out of the scrum of bodies trying to climb the pole. As the other soldiers move away, he approaches the pole and studies it. While the sergeant yells at him to get back in line, Rogers pulls a pin at the base of the pole. The pole falls to the ground, and Rogers retrieves the flag. Handing it to the sergeant, he climbs into the jeep to the astonished silence of his comrades. In another scene, the soldiers are doing calisthenics. Rogers is in the back row, flailing again, not even able to do a push-up. The military leader takes a hand grenade out of a box, pulls the pin, and throws it into the formation of soldiers and yells, "Grenade!" All of the soldiers scatter, taking cover where they can find it. Except Rogers. He runs toward the grenade and throws himself on it. There is a shocked, tense silence. Then, nothing. Someone says, "A dummy grenade." Rogers gets up sheepishly. In thinking about these scenes, I was struck by a biblical theme. What do you think? What Bible story or theme do you see? There are a number of good answers, but what I thought of is from 1 Samuel 16, 1 through 13, and this is the Common English Bible. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long are you going to grieve over Saul? I have rejected him as king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and get going. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem because I have found my next king among his sons." "How can I do that?" Samuel asked. When Saul hears of it, he'll kill me." "Take a heifer with you," the Lord replied, "and say, 'I have come to make a sacrifice to the Lord.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will make clear to you what you should do. You will anoint for me the person I point out to you." Samuel did what the Lord instructed. When he came to Bethlehem, the city elders came to meet him. They were shaking with fear. "Do you come in peace?" they asked. "Yes," Samuel answered. "I've come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Now make yourselves holy, then come with me to the sacrifice." Samuel made Jesse and his sons holy and invited them to the sacrifice as well. When they arrived, Samuel looked at Eliab and thought, "That must be the Lord's anointed right in front." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Have no regard for his appearance or stature, because I haven't selected him. God doesn't look at things like humans do. Humans see only what is visible to the eyes, but the Lord sees into the heart." Next, Jesse called for Abinadab, who presented himself to Samuel. But he said, "The Lord hasn't chosen this one either." So Jesse presented Shammah. But Samuel said, "No, the Lord hasn't chosen this one." Jesse presented 7 of his sons to Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord hasn't picked any of these." Then Samuel asked Jesse, "Is that all of your boys?" "There is still the youngest one," Jesse answered, "but he's out keeping the sheep." "Send for him," Samuel told Jesse, "because we can't proceed until he gets here." So Jesse sent and brought him in. He was reddish brown, had beautiful eyes, and was good looking. The Lord said, "That's the one. Go anoint him." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him right there in front of his brothers. The Lord's Spirit came over David from that point forward. God doesn't look at things like humans do. Humans see only what is visible to the eyes, but the Lord sees into the heart. Steve Rogers had a heart that was brave, smart, and self-sacrificing. God looked into David's heart and saw a great leader. What had humans missed by looking only at the outer appearance that God saw when he looked within? The prophet Samuel was prepared to choose the eldest of Jesse's sons. After all, the eldest is the favored one, the most important, the obvious choice. But this isn't a story about the obvious. It's about the unlikely people that God invests his grace in. David was the 8th son. far down the line of succession and importance. He was a shepherd, a lowly job for a lowly person. He was from the village of Bethlehem, a backwater, dead-end kind of place. He was from a family of no stature. David's father, Jesse, was of no apparent wealth or respect. His great-grandmother was Ruth, a Moabite immigrant. His great-grandfather was Boaz, a descendant of a Canaanite woman almost executed for adultery, and a prostitute. But God sees into the heart, into the will and character of the person. God sees possibilities in unexpected places and through unlikely people, including an ordinary shepherd. It's God's grace that made David sufficient, not Samuel's expectations, and certainly not what his culture judged about appearances. So what's in this for us? First, we need to admit that we tend to be like Samuel, confusing appearance with value, and we project that onto others. We don't expect good things to come in small or humble packages. We don't look to the ordinary or the least or the stranger among us to come bearing spiritual gifts. And so we easily miss opportunities to participate in God's grace. That's why it's so important to participate in hands-on ministry in our community, face to face and hand in hand with our neighbors. You are more likely to see the reality of Jesus Christ in others. All of our giving is good and important, but it's when you actually touch hands with the least, the stranger, and the other that you can see and feel the remarkable and unexpected ways that God is moving in and among you, us, and our community. When we look past the appearance of stranger and give others the chance to reveal their hearts, we find good people, scared people, worried people, people who have needs just like we do. We find people who need Jesus as much as us, and we receive blessing from them. You will never know the joy of being needed, of changing a human life for the better, until you let go of expectations about appearances and touch someone else up close in ministry. There are risks. You might give your heart and receive nothing you can name in return. But the grace of God is in your service and will find its way back to you through one route or another. So let us welcome the stranger personally, with open hearts, open minds, and open arms, and not project preconceived images onto them. Secondly, we tend to be like Samuel, confusing appearance with value, and we project that onto ourselves. We usually tend to devalue ourselves, to not see ourselves as the effective instruments of God's grace that we are. We waste a lot of time and a lot of ministry opportunity thinking things like, I can't do that. I would fail. I'm not worthy of that task. It's too hard for me. I think cosplayers can be an inspiration to us. All of these men and women, boys and girls, are ordinary people. They look in the mirror and see a nose that they think is too long or too short. They see a student or a clerk or an engineer who works too hard and is tired from it. They see someone who has wounds and scars, both physical and spiritual. But in their costumes, they display their hearts. Someone who is powerful, heroic, strong, victorious. What if God looks at you with your too short nose, your weariness and worries, your wounded spirit, and sees Batman or Wonder Woman? What if God sees into your heart and recognizes something extraordinary, something he knows is there because you are his beloved child, created by him in his image? Well, guess what, brothers and sisters? That's exactly what happens. God created you and knows your inner being, will, and character, and loves you with an undying love. God knows what he created you for, your gifts, your calling. And God calls you not to accepting appearances, not to accepting who you think you are or who our culture says you are, but to realizing and living who he has created you to be. Our job is to let go of appearances and excuses about our unworthiness. Let go of how our culture defines us. Let go of our own limited vision of ourselves in order to surrender to who God says we are, who God sees when he looks into our hearts. Everybody looked at Steve Ryan and saw a puny, useless guy, but God saw something different. Samuel looked at David and saw someone unimportant, of no consequence, but God knew better. Let's not look at ourselves and each other through the eyes of our culture, eyes that judge by appearances. Let us see into the heart through God's eyes. We are all his beloved children, all gifted, all called, all surrounded, upheld, and empowered by his grace. Let us pray. Holy God, open the eyes of our hearts to see our neighbor and ourselves as the children of God we are. Help us reach out with open minds and arms, and then let us receive the blessing you have for us when we see your image in ourselves and others. In Jesus' name, amen.